Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today's October 21st, 2022, and let's get over the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? So today, there haven't been that much or that many developments happening since yesterday, obviously, but I just want to kind of expand more on the topic of the Kherson offensive. First and foremost, the news that are coming up today is that the Russian army is retreating, and that was confirmed by the Ukrainian media that they're under pressure by the armed forces of Ukraine near Kherson, and that is only good news. As you might have heard yesterday, there is a media blackout by the Ukrainian army. The government is not releasing any information right now about what is happening on the front lines in Kherson. So we don't really know where the Ukrainian army is, which settlements they managed to capture back. But let's hope that this weekend we'll have a little bit more news and we'll have a little bit more updates as to where they managed to have some success. So I'll keep you guys updated over the weekend. Maybe Sunday I'll make a video and we'll look it over. But due to this success that the Ukrainian army is having, the Russians are apparently preparing to destroy the Novakakhovka Dam. As I've mentioned yesterday in my previous video, I mentioned that this is a possibility and that there are more and more news coming out that they have mined and planted bombs on the dam to blow it up and then essentially flood the southern part of Kherson. If we look at the map here, which I've prepared already, we can see that the dam is right here, the Novakakhovka Dam, and Kherson is right here. So once they blow it up, which I believe they will, this entire region will be flooded. And what you see here is how the Dnipro River, how wide it is here and how it shortens in its width as it passes through the dam, obviously. And I'm expecting that the river will probably reach the same level of width as it is here. So this is going to be catastrophic, not only environmentally, but it would be a humanitarian crisis. There's a lot of settlements in southern Kherson, and the biggest settlement of them all is the Kherson city. So this would be catastrophic. It would change the entire landscape of the oblast. But I think this is just the only playbook, the only thing left in the Russian playbook, I should say. They have nothing else that they can do to stop the Ukrainian army at this point. I think that Kherson is a lost cause for the Russian army. They're unable to push their supplies due to the fact that the bridge that connects, the only main bridge, or the two main bridges that connect Kherson are blown up. Novakakhovka also has a sort of a small little bridge that was destroyed by the Ukrainian army. But there's also the much larger Antonovsky Bridge, which is right here, which was also rendered unusable by the Ukrainian army through several HIMARS strikes. So the Russians have no more choice. They have to do something, and their best course of action is to blow up the dam and flood the entire region. Unfortunately, I think it's very likely to happen. And let's look at the actual bridge I was mentioning, the Antonovsky Bridge. Just let's look at a video how the Russians are currently crossing because it's been rendered unusable. This is a ferry that they're using right beside the bridge, right beside it to have some physical cover and also under the disguising themselves with civilians so they're not being hit by Ukrainian strikes. If you look at it here, these are the ferries that they have set up right beside the bridge. And this essentially, for them is less efficient. They can't push as much equipment, soldiers, and military assets to reinforce the Western Bank, but it's still an option that they still have right now. And you'll see in this video as well that on a little bit later, the cameraman is going to be filming civilians that are also crossing. So the Russians know exactly what they're doing, and they know that by allowing civilians to also cross right beside them, the Ukrainians are not going to be hitting them. It's just not going to happen. We're not going to be killing our own innocent people. in this case. So this is how the Russians are still able to reinforce to a certain degree their lines, but not as efficiently as if they would have had this bridge still intact. And you can see all the holes in this bridge where you essentially can't be, driving anymore because it's extremely unstable. And speaking of all the damage that the Russians have made, there has been article that came out from the Kiev School of Economics, which indicates that the damage caused by this war started by Russia has reached almost $63 billion worth of infrastructure damage. So we're only talking about infrastructure. And the global economic losses are about $600 billion so far. Now, these are only economic numbers, right? The human lives that were lost, the tragedies that ensued, just everything that was impacted by this conflict is probably even worse than just looking at it from a purely economic aspect. But let's hope that this war ends very, very soon, and that, of course, the Russians will have to pay back for all the tragedies and the destruction they have caused in Ukraine. I'm truly a big believer that this is not only, we shouldn't be only blaming the Russian government for this, but it's also a population issue, right? The fact is, why did Putin manage to keep power for so long, right? He's been in power for 22 years, since 2000. And why? Because the Russian people allowed it to be like that. The Russian people, the majority of them, I'm not saying everyone, but the grand majority of Russian people were okay with Putin as a leader. They were completely happy and satisfied with his leadership, his government, and the way that things were in Russia. I'm not saying everyone was happy, but a grand majority of people supported him and are still supporting him, no matter how much the media tries to say that this is just government issues. As when Putin leaves, everything is going to be restored back to normal. I don't believe that. And I think that it's only going to be even worse if Putin leaves. It's going to create a massive power vacuum full of corrupt leaders that will want to take over his place. And they'll do the same thing. They'll create an illusion that they're trying to push for democracy and get closer ties to the West, but they only know one way. These this corrupt kleptocracy, and it's corruption. It's the old Soviet mentality that still exists to this day in this hierarchical structure in Russia, which is still very founded on the old principles of the Soviet Union. Nothing has really changed in Russia. So I also believe that a reform of the population is very necessary for true change in Russia. Because even if Putin was to die tomorrow, I believe that the situation would be very, very similar the next day. He is not the only factor, affecting this conflict. And in other news, here's a Twitter post that I wanted to showcase because there has been a lot of, news and articles saying how laughable the Russian army is, and to a certain extent, yes, the majority of the Russian army is in a very catastrophically bad situation. They're poorly equipped. They do not have good training, good experience, and thus we focus very much so on that. But I also want to focus on the fact that there's still a large amount of very well professional, well-trained, experienced Russian soldiers. And explaining to the people that are watching this video, why is it so slow? Well, because Russia is a massive army, has a massive army, has massive amounts of military assets. And we can see in these pictures that these soldiers are very well equipped. These are Spetsnaz and the Wagner private military companies. They're very well equipped and they're still capable of doing damage to the Ukrainian army. As much as we want to portray the Russians as incapable and as walking meat and cannon fodder, there is still a very vast amounts of soldiers within the Russian army that are very well trained. As you can see here, they have the latest weaponry. and they're very well equipped. You can see here they're holding AK-12s, which are the newest Kalashnikovs that the Russian army has been developing. And so you can see that it's not like the Ukrainians are only fighting, at this point, people that have just a military, World War II military uniform. They're still fighting a very capable army that has large, large stockpiles of weaponry and tanks and everything that you can think of. And the last thing I'm not sure if this is really important, but I just want to hit it here. Silvio Berlusconi, the former Italian leader, was caught on tape blaming the Ukrainian president for pushing Russia to invade. Unfortunately, this is not the only president in Europe or the government in Europe that is saying that it's Ukraine's fault for uh, Russia's invasion, essentially. I think we can name a very large amount of countries that are currently um, just strangely, supporting Russia. I think Hungary is doing the same. There's also Serbia. Well, Serbia's always been very pro-Russian, but um, very surprising. The Italians. I'm not really sure where they're standing, to be honest, in this conflict, and I'm not very knowledgeable enough to be able to really discern that. But the fact that the Italians did elect a right-wing government, which I guess is the government that Berlusconi started, if correct me if I'm wrong, kind of shows that there still is a disconnect in Europe as to um, who they are supporting in terms of this conflict. And, it only plays in Russia's advantage when there is this divisive narrative with people like Silvio Berlusconi saying that this is Ukraine's fault for apparently being invaded by Russia and, having millions of people displaced, thousands of people dead, Ukrainian people dead, and the horrifics barbaric actions that the Russian soldiers have committed all throughout Ukraine. Apparently, it's Ukraine's fault for that. So I don't understand these people, and I think there's a special place for them once they will die. That's all I have to say, in my personal opinion. To have such thinking, in my opinion, is just absolutely unacceptable, especially for a politician. Um, I don't understand them, to be honest, but it is the way it is. And so, unfortunately, these are the hurdles that Ukraine has to fight against because there's many of these people, even in the United States, that think that Putin is a saint and Putin is in its complete right to do what he's doing right now. It's absolutely unbelievable. But unfortunately, we live in a world with different opinions, and we have to accept that. So here it is, guys. That's my video for today. I appreciate you watching this video. And if you can leave me a subscribe button, like the video, and leave me a comment if you want to share any of your opinions, I'll be very happy to read and reply to your comments if you have any questions as well. Thank you, and I'm wishing you a very great day. I'll keep you guys updated in the next couple of days as well. Thanks. Take care.